Oi oi, it's your boy, the David Onama of being a demo man spammer, Jack Slack. It's the Jack Slack podcast, and we're coming at you on Monday the 29th, following a very low-key weekend of fights, back in the Apex, back on the trash, another week of Apex trash, as Al Pacino would say in every movie after he gave up acting properly. Main event, 2 flyweights on losses. Or coming off losses. Brilliant. Actually, they were all right. So, Alex Perez was all right. Nicolau did what he normally does, which is turn up and go, I might do something. I might not. But now I'm booked for 5 rounds. Can you imagine if Alex Perez hadn't mercifully put us out of our misery and let us go to a 25-minute Mateus Nicolau fight? I'd be a lot less upbeat this episode. We'll start with positive story of the week from Combat Sports. Cracking fight in Rajadamnern. I'm probably saying it right because I am the foremost podcaster on this subject. But you had a featherweight title fight between Chyla and Yotin. I'm reliably told it's said, even though it's spelled Yothin, which you can find on the RWS YouTube channel. Just search RWS or RWS Muay Thai on YouTube. And the channel will be the top result, and the fight will probably be the top result because they've just uploaded it. But they're another one of those fight promotions who upload their fights to YouTube immediately after they've happened, and we love them. Great fight between 2 very skilled Nak Muay. I believe they met twice before already, but this was for the RWS belt, which is also the Rajadamnern belt, I believe. And you'll know Yotin, or Yothin, from probably the most viral Muay Thai clip I've ever seen. It was going wild on Twitter and Facebook the other week. It was him. If you've not seen it, it's him setting up an elbow on someone, like showing them slowly how he does it. And the edit is really good. It cuts to him doing it from basically the same angle in a fight and cutting the guy wide open. It's incredible. But he came out and smashed Chyla with the same elbow in round 5 of this fight. It was a 5-rounder. They both, I think, they did open scoring, and I think both of them had 2 rounds in the bag by the final round. But Chyla, the southpaw, was throwing this left kick to the body, and Yothin basically put everything else on hold to deal with it. He was standing there with his leg up checking. Chyla would feint it and then throw it, and he'd be there for both. Like if he reacted to the feint, he'd go, well, I'm staying here, because if you throw the real kick, I want to check that too. So a couple of times he got blasted with the left straight when he was on one leg trying to check. But his rounds were basically all down to pressure. He just went forward, backed Chyla up, and some interesting clinch work in this one. Still, I think I've said this before, but RWS, I think in their push to be more like worldwide renowned through their YouTube, they do seem to be very... they don't allow as much clinch work as I have seen them in like old stadium fights in Rajadamnern. But the clinch work in this one was good fun. They were both landing good little digging knees. And you can really see, like, when someone's good at knees, because they're not, like, big slam it in from the side like you would on the bag, looking cool, hopping and throwing 100 in a row. They're just little digs that catch guys as their body is in position to take one, or there's enough distance between their bodies to take one. But yeah, well worth your time. Great fight, 5 rounds of 2 dudes taking lumps out of each other. What are you going to lose? The only downside of it was that they were both knackered in the 5th round and convinced that they'd done enough to win, even though there was open scoring. And I don't know if they tell the people in the stadium, but there was open scoring on the screen saying that they both had 2 rounds in the bag. And we're halfway through round 5 and they're both knackered. And they're both trying to pretend that they've already got it in the bag. So they're both circling the ring like dancing. And the referee just comes in and goes, knock that shit off, and takes a point off both. So the last round had to be 9-8. Oh, and actually there was something else good on this weekend. Glory had a show that wasn't as disastrous as most of their shows. Ryzen's on, well, the day that this comes out, Monday, Ryzen will be on then. So I'll talk about that on the Boycast. But Glory, classic Glory weirdness, 2 fights in a row on the main card end by shoulder dislocation. One, this big fat lad comes out, swings an overhand, falls short, and immediately rips his shoulder out of its socket with this overhand. And that's the end of it, 40 seconds in. The second, I think, was kind of bullshit, because halfway through the second round, they clinch up, they fall on the mat, and this guy separates his shoulder. Now, trips and throws aren't legal in Glory. But the Glory refs are like the most bumbling in combat sports. So they quickly award a TKO to the guy who didn't have his shoulder separate when they both fell to the mat in the illegal trip or throw or whatever it was. Never been a more clear no contest case there. Or at least technical decision. But I suppose you'd need to get through the full 2 rounds. All I'm saying is that it's dumb that guy gets a KO win on his record based off the other guy falling on his elbow. But the main event was crazy, because I've not checked out Glory's welterweight division in a while. Not since Cedric Doumbé left, I don't think. Doumbé had those fights with Nicky Holzgen. He also had those fights with Myrtle Groenhart. And then he left for MMA. And oh my God, Todd Grisham's on commentary for this card. And he just keeps saying things that like the producer must be screaming in his ear. Don't say it like that. That's weird. So he's talking about like this guy in the co-main event who's fighting an MMA fighter who's jumped in at short notice. And they're going like, well, don't worry about whatever his name was, Bahram. He's not going to MMA. He doesn't know anything about jiu-jitsu. He can't wrestle. It's like, stop saying it like he's not good enough to go to MMA. That's not selling your point. Because Glory's problem has been like the guys at the top of their divisions, and Alex Pereira won belts in 2 divisions, go, okay, but you can't pay me enough. You're filling these arenas with people and you're not paying me enough. And then they leave. And then Glory inducts them into their Hall of Fame to have them come back for a night and be like, hi, yeah, I'm off doing better things for more money. I threw myself into a sport where I was at a massive disadvantage because they wouldn't pay me at the top end of this sport. But anyway, it was Andy Semele was the champion, and I'd heard good things about him, and I was watching this fight. He's fighting Chico Quasi, who is nicknamed Luffy or Luffy from that anime that everyone loves. I will be king of the pirates. That's what he says, right? And he has his straw hat to put on after he wins or loses the fight. A bit sad if you lose, though. Like Alistair Overeem's Warhammer that he used to bring to the ring in Pride, and then he'd have to like carry it out if he got beaten. You just see like walking back up the ramp going, oh, dragging the hammer behind him. But Chico Quasi, I said this on Twitter, but if you have, well, I've criticised Paddy Pimblett for having his chin up in the air, but if you've ever said Paddy Pimblett needs to learn from world-class kickboxers, this guy just won the welterweight title and became the number 1 ranked welterweight in the world anywhere, with his chin pointing at the fucking ring lights. Dude's game is like entirely kicking because he's very tall and very long. But he's got such tall man defense because his chin's up in the air. He's throwing jabs with his chin up in the air. He gets his right hand high and he thinks he's like protecting himself. But his chin is still up in the goddamn air. And he's got one of the weirdest styles I've ever seen. Andy Semele is landing these low kicks to Chico Quasi's lead leg, which is his left leg. And Chico Quasi takes the brunt of the low kick and extends his leg as it's being kicked offline. And it just hooks in behind Andy Semele's other leg. And it's like an inside low kick. And then he'll throw like front kick to the face with the lead leg and just to set it down and throw like a slappy inside low kick, stuff like that. But the way that he won was by throwing a right push kick at Andy Semele, missing and spinning into a back fist. And Andy Semele jumped in for a counter. Because everyone does this. As soon as a kick misses, they go, right, my turn to swing. And they step in, and if you do a spinning back fist or a spinning elbow or even the Raymond Daniels jump spinning back kick, they will run right onto it. And he did, and he got rocked, and he never really recovered. So there was 3 knockdowns, and he was done. But worth watching for just a dude with a really weird style, succeeding at the highest levels of kickboxing, even while committing the cardinal sin of pointing your chin in the air. Right, let's talk UFC then. What did we have on this card? Main event was Matheus Nicolau versus Alex Perez. And I thought Alex Perez looked pretty good, actually. Matheus Nicolau was doing that thing where he's like, I'm getting my reads for most of this fight. So he didn't really do much. There was one good right straight to left hook counter to Alex Perez front kick. But Perez came out like he was playing the trombone with one hand by his head and the other hand pumping non-threatening jabs constantly. Which looks ridiculous, but, you know, his movement and feinting were what really got him in a lot of these times. He was pumping his hand out there like a jab and getting closer and closer to Nicolau, while Nicolau was not, you know, Nicolau would love you to stand perfectly still or, like, you know, not bounce around, not move your hands much, and walk up to him. And then when you step forward, he's going to counter you. That's what he does. He leads people around the cage, and as soon as they're like, right, I'm attacking now, and they step in, he counters that step. Go watch him murk Schnell. Or his fight with Manel Kape. What Perez was able to do was show lots of feints, just like different kinds of feints. He was using sort of the pumping hands. He was using raising the lead leg. He was showing some shoulder feints. And then what I really liked was before this first flurry, the one where he hit him with or he threw 5 punches and landed a good right hand to the body, he took a step to the right. And he kept doing that, just taking little steps to the right and left to make Matheus Nicolau reset. Because if you're coming straight through the front door at Matheus Nicolau when he's waiting for you, with a baseball bat behind the door, that's not good. You take a little step to the right, little step to the left, make him turn around to face you and attack him while he's turning. And we're only talking small turns here. Go watch that first running flurry. He takes just a little step to the right, and as Matheus Nicolau is naturally just turning to face him slightly, he runs in. I really liked the right hand to the body that he used a few times in this fight. Right hand to the body is massively underrated generally, which is weird because you can land it really well on a heavy bag. So you'd think guys go, yep, that's one of my best punches, I'll keep throwing it. But I think because of the magic of the liver shot, everyone goes, Fighter's Anatomy, we go, the liver's on the right side of the body. Why would I throw my right hand when my left hand touches the liver? There's nothing on the right side. I'm sorry, if you get hit in the body on the right side, it's going to hurt. It's not like being banged in the liver where just you feel a little bit dead inside. But if you hit someone in the floating rib, you hit someone in the kidney, which is totally legal in MMA, even if you're just hitting their love handle over and over again, it'll hurt. And it'll wear them out. And it'll take away from their breathing. It'll slow them down. And it sets up the overhand so well. Hunter Azure, who used to be in the UFC and was a good fun fighter, he had a knockout this weekend in some regional show. Hang on, I retweeted it. I'll go look it up. Hold on. UFL. So he was at UFL 4 and he knocked out Amun Cosme by going jab, right hook to the body, moving around a little bit, and then going jab and looking like he was about to throw the right hook to the body again, coming across the top with the overhand and starching this dude. Another great example would be Barry McGuigan against Eusebio Pedrosa. Great featherweight champion, fantastic, filthy cheat. But when Barry McGuigan knocked him down, that was like 2 right hands to the body, as in jab, right hand to the body, break. Jab, right hand to the body, break. Jab, right hand to the head. And if you do a little duck first, like Rocky Marciano, they used to call it his blind right because he'd throw his head in towards your chest as if he was coming in to hit your body, and then he'd throw the right hand across the top and knock you out. I like the front kick to the face that Perez was showing a couple of times in this fight. He did get it counted in the first round. But second round, he gets Nicolau towards the fence because Nicolau loves circling the cage along the fence, which you remember from the Schnell fight. The only one we've ever seen of him, basically, because he knocked the dude out so people bothered to watch it. But he likes circling around the perimeter of the cage. And Perez steps in and cuts him off with the right hand, with like a right hand to the body, slaps him with a right hand on the shoulder, and then a right hook to the chin, and then a left, and then a right hook again, and because Nicolau's punching back, he chins him and knocks him out. It was throwing in, 1, feints, 2, movement, 3, throwing in combination. All those got him way ahead of Manel Kape. Manel Kape is supposed to be a very scary striker. And he fought Matheus Nicolau and just looked like really confused. And everyone went, oh, Manel doesn't show up sometimes. And Manel doesn't show up an awful lot of the time because he pulls out of a lot of fights, including this one. But he was just confused, and he doesn't do a lot of combination work, and he doesn't do a lot of feinting. He does a lot of exploding and being powerful. And a decent bit of counterpunching, but if the other guy's waiting for you, it's very hard to counterpunch him. So I think Alex Perez did a great job here. I think he had Colin Oyama in his corner. He's Team Oyama. And, their relationship seemed good. Colin Oyama seemed really happy for him. It was nice to see Oyama back in action. I mean, he's been around forever. I was looking at, who was I watching? Oh, Shane Del Rosario. Massive dude. Heavyweight. Went undefeated into Strikeforce and was like for the Strikeforce Heavyweight Grand Prix, which we all remember. He won a place as the tournament reserve, but they brought him into the UFC instead. And he got Stipe Miocic in his first bout and lost, and then got knocked out by Pat Barry in his second bout. But then he tragically died of heart failure, later in the same year, I think it was. When was it? Hold on. Oh, no, he lost that fight in December 2012, and he died in December 2013. But, he was a surprisingly decent kickboxer at heavyweight, and had decent jiu-jitsu as well, actually. He was Team Oyama. But yeah, the Team Oyama's been around forever, and they just sort of quietly get on with things. They don't get an awful lot of attention like a lot of the other teams. But really nice for Alex Perez because he's had I don't want to say year from hell, he's had several years from hell. He's had all these cancellations, most of them not his fault. A few of them were his fault. I'd said none of them were his fault last time, and that's not entirely fair. But, whether you have to pull from the fight or the opponent pulls from the fight, you don't get paid either way. You don't get to fight. You lose time, and time is such a valuable commodity in fighting because you've only got, 10 years of this? On average, it's probably less. I think it's 7 years. Most guys run to the title, most great guys run to the title, and then when they lose the title, it always works out at 7 or 8 years, or mostly works out at 7 or 8 years. I'd been saying he was like the flyweight Tony Ferguson in that he just he got a title shot, or he got himself into position where he was title contention, then immediately just fell off a cliff and nothing happened ever again. But the Mikhaev fight was really promising last time, so I was actually pretty excited for him to be back this time. But yeah, I mean, he's got to feel good for him getting the win, but I think a lot of people felt like he got a pretty huge moral victory in the Mikhaev fight because Mikhaev had to do some real bullshittery to get through that one. But his striking looked way better here than it did in the Mikhaev fight. The Mikhaev fight, I think I was listening to Heavy Hands, and they were saying he lost that fight basically because he was winning on everything except scoreable criteria, I think was how they described it, and I think that's spot on. Nicolau's a weird one because I've always had an old relationship with him because sometimes, I think the Matt Schnell one is his only finish in a very long time, but sometimes he'd look pretty interesting, and I'd go, oh, I quite like Matthias Nicolau, he quietly working away there as an awkward counterpuncher. But it was very frustrating when you saw him against Matt Schnell and you were like, well, do you just have this confidence because this guy's just walking on to you? If you could have a little bit... I appreciate that as a counterfighter, and this is something that all counterfighters fall prey to at some point. If you're a very good counterfighter, you get a little bit reluctant to lead because you're like, well, I know all the bad things that can happen to me on the lead, and I could just wait instead. Shooting first is... it becomes like a disadvantage to you in your head. I think of Anderson Silva, who basically invented counterpunching in MMA, or counterfighting, and when he was forced to go on the lead, he looked nowhere near as good. It actually, in the last portion of his UFC career, he finally started to add some leads back into his game, but he started out his career as an aggressive, forward-going, try and sprawl on the takedowns and shoot 1-2s and things, a shoot box fighter. And then he moved to work with Nogueira, and he got to work on a backwards-moving counterfighting style more. And he just sort of went, I don't like leading anymore. And then he had these fights with Patrick Cote, where he just, if they didn't lead to him, he was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I better dance, and then everyone will say that I'm murdering this man. But yeah, if Nicolau could just get a little bit more confident throwing some fucking strikes, not just he waits too long on the counter a lot, but also just times when he could go forward. If you go forward and you rattle someone with a high kick against the guard that they get angry about, they're so much more liable to come back at you, certainly if they're angry too, with some bullshit that you can counter. The pure counter fighter is such a flawed type of fighter to be, base style, TM. To have success as a counter fighter, you have to be able to go forward, convince the guy to throw back at you, and then tear him apart with that counter-fighting ability that you've got. So what else was on this card? Co-main event between Ryan Spann and Bogdan Guskov. Bogdan Guskov. Guskov's interesting because, when Ryan Spann was throwing punches, Guskov's hands were often down and he'd get caught on the end of these punches, but he was moving well with them. He wasn't, taking the brunt of the punches, because Ryan Spann's a pretty big hitter, and you've seen him drop a lot of people. And I'm sure part of this is that Guskov takes a great shot, but also, it's encouraging that because his style relies on him dropping his hands, he takes a run up into his punches. He goes, right, I'm throwing the right hand lead, and his hands come from a high guard to down by his chest, and he lunges towards you. And if he did that and he couldn't take a shot, and he couldn't roll off some of the power, he'd be very worried. But in this one, again, it was run up into right hand lead, works a couple of times. He's very quick with it. That's why it's working. He's not fighting, I don't want to say he's not fighting complete idiots because it's the light heavyweight division, but he's not fighting absolute bums. These guys do know that he's got a right-hand lead that's going to come at some point, and their teams tell him, the very first one he threw in this fight, Ryan Spann ducked into the clinch and got the takedown. And, most of the first round was in top position. Because throwing a right-hand lead should get you in trouble if you're doing it all the time. But then, Ryan Spann slowed down a little bit, and Bogdan Guskov kept the same speed, shot those right-hand leads. His jab looked good when he threw it, and it made me go, oh, another fighter with a great jab who doesn't use it. Fantastic. Need more of them. And then the finish was the finish was ground and pound, but the knockdown was a great right uppercut inside the jab. Whenever you see that. Who else landed one like that this weekend? Someone else landed a great uppercut. Oh, it was Medic on Means. Uros Medic. Tim Means was throwing, jabbing and dipping. The dipping jab. The secret to beating Amanda Nunes. Beat her so badly that she couldn't work it out and she changed stances instead of learning to box. But Tim Means dipping jabbed in and Uros Medic just timed him with the uppercut. Slipped the jab through the right uppercut. Slumped him. And it was the same opening here. It's the one that I always talk about. I don't have enough nice examples of it. Almost any other counterpunch I can show you a dozen examples of. But the right uppercut with the same principles as the cross counter. The cross counter is when you slip inside a jab. So you slip to the chest side rather than the elbow side, or rather than the outside, rather than away from the opponent. You slip into the middle of them. You put your head in the middle, and then you throw your right hand across the top. So you're crossing their jab. Very old counter. The two first techniques in boxing were the jab and the cross counter. It was just trying to time jabs and time overhands across the top, basically. This uppercut I'm talking about, which was written about by gentleman Jim Corbett, he said it was his favourite punch. And apparently it was a counter uppercut that he used to make Bob Fitzsimmons bite his tongue in half when they fought. But you slip inside the jab and you throw the right uppercut at the same time instead. And you can murk people because it's a punch they never ever see. Everyone jabs with the expectation of the overhand coming across the top. If you throw the uppercut instead, a great example. Ooh. Khamzat versus Ikram Aliskerov, funnily enough. Oh, I thought I saved one on Twitter because I specifically said, no, I did. Hang on. Igor Skoczyslas. Igor, Skoczyslas, landed one back in March. Or at least the examples from March. But yeah, they're very cool. So Bogdan Guskov, will he go far? Well, I've just seen a guy win the light heavyweight title and defend the light heavyweight title with just a left hook. So there's no reason that a guy with just a right-hand lead couldn't do it. Anything else? Do you know what? Austen Lane, top quality meme fighter. People are picking up on him and going, yeah, he's pretty funny. Because I think he's had 2 fights in the UFC and both he's been hilariously murked. Yeah, Justin Taffer. Oh, no, he's had 3 because he had that no contest eye poke against Justin Taffer. But even more memey. But 3 fights in the UFC, 1 no contest in the first 30 seconds, and 2 hilarious knockout losses. But actually does a couple of things that I like. Like against Justin Taffer, I was going, oh, it's nice to see a heavyweight kicking like that. He threw a couple of side kicks, a couple of inside low kicks or whatever, and then he did it from too close, and Justin Taffer stepped in and clouted him. But in this fight, he hit a really nice stepping, level-changing trip. So, like shooting a double, but with the trip as well, like TJ Dillashaw always used to do. Got top position, did nothing with it for 4 minutes, went into the second round absolutely gassed. I was going, what are you gassed from? You didn't do anything. Surely, like in the gym, you're laying on a heavy bag and hitting it for rounds. You didn't even do that. But then, like, he'll pop out jabs, and you see the length of his arms, and when he throws his jab, it snaps the guy's head back, and you go, damn. Oh, I like what you're doing there, Austen Lane. And then you realise that he's sort of like closing his eyes and just throwing it whenever the other guy steps in. And you're going, oh no, that's going to get you knocked out, Austen Lane. And then he does get knocked out. And I saw an interesting debate happening on Reddit. People were like, oh, everyone says these NFL athletes, if they came over, they'd be unstoppable. And the truth is, like, he played in the NFL, but he's 36. And he'd already lost like 3 fights before he even got to the UFC. When we're talking about like, well, certainly when I'm talking about like elite athletes and why the heavyweight division is so shallow, there is no money here for people who are athletic giants because there's tons of money in the NFL or the NBA, depending on what kind of giant you are. Basically, it relies on you having come from a weird part of the world, where those are not an option. So Francis Ngannou, absolute athletic freak, but at no point in his life he came from Cameroon and went to France. But at no point in his early life did someone say, hey, you're 6'4" and almost 300 pounds. Do you want to play soccer, or as we in the rest of the world call it, football? Not an awful lot of giants in football. But yeah, if you had real money available for every fight in MMA, you might start to get some of these giants coming in. But it's going to be people who either failed early in their NFL career or got a football scholarship and didn't have what it takes to get on a big team, or had injuries. And then you're already getting like a diminished athletic product. Plus, even at heavyweight where everyone's trash and their conditioning is trash, this is still an endurance sport. So NFL players, working in sprints, I don't know if gassing out like this would be uncommon. But it was a trash fight. The best fight on this card, as we said before the card, was probably going to be David Onama versus Jonathan Pearce, and it was, because it's two competent fighters in a good division. Well, two good fighters in a good division, actually. Sorry, I had to get another Jaffa cake. This is how I'm getting through these Apex cards. Just back on the Jaffas. Full Jaffa Jack back in action. But Onama did the boy-worthy thing of missing weight by 2 pounds and then immediately hitting the flex. I love it. I mean, they are asked probably to pose on the scale, but to miss weight and then do a flex is so funny. Like, look how massive I am. But he did it solemnly, which I respect. He was like, If he turned around and did like side chest, that would be less understandable. But Onama started out by tooling Pearce up on the feet. And what you saw was, I think this might be a James Krause thing. I don't know, James Krause. Oh, I need to add a spooky sound on my soundboard for James Krause, because he was back this week with creative accounting. He's now selling. But James Krause, it might be a James Krause thing, Glory MMA, whatever they are, because Brandon Moreno was doing it against Kai Kara France. But where you're bringing your back foot up constantly and put, onto the ball of the back foot so that your knee comes forward and you're in like a sprinter stance, but you do it in a way that's faking a rear leg kick. So Lyoto Machida used to do this a lot in his later career. Once he'd sort of established that he had a wicked front kick to the body, once he'd dropped a few guys with that, he started faking it and drawing his rear foot up underneath him, so that when he thrust forward with a jab or to start any kind of flurry, he could go further than he previously could. It's a big thing in point karate, sneaking the back foot up underneath you. So there's some lovely examples in this fight of Onama faking the kick, bringing his knee up, and then jabbing and going like right through Pearce's head. Then Pearce would attempt takedowns, and he started shooting head outside singles, pushing to the fence, and then hitting the Malkoun finish, which was awesome. Jacob Malkoun changing this sport. If you've not seen the Filthy Casuals guide, it's on my YouTube channel, to Jacob Malkoun and his one unstoppable move. It's one of those interesting things, because I had guys come and be like, oh, it's bollocks, it's crap wrestling. If you did that to a wrestler, it's like, it's not crap wrestling, it's wall wrestling, which doesn't exist in wrestling. I mean, he's trying for the match with Bo Nickel, which would be hilarious if he could take Bo Nickel down. But, in wrestling, you grab a single leg and the guy has all the mat to run around. And before they changed the rules, certainly in jiu-jitsu now, in no-gi grappling, you could run out of the mat and get a restart. That is the one reason that the Karate Combat Pit is good for no-gi grappling, because if you watch the no-gi Worlds, certainly a couple of years ago, it was like the moment you concede a single leg or anything like that, you just run out of bounds. They did start disqualifying people very early on for running out of bounds in submissions, but you could still get away with like, oh no, he's going to take me down, I better crawl out of the area. But yes, Jonathan Pearce is hitting this Malkoun finish, and I thought it was interesting because the first couple of times he went for it, the Malkoun finish is you grab the single with your head on the outside along the fence, and then you step your foot between their legs so that your foot is pressed up against the fence behind their standing leg, and then you run the pipe so that they fall over it. And it's very hard to stop, because it's a combination of running the pipe and the inside trip, and they don't have an awful lot of directions that they can move in. And we talked about this on the Filthy Casuals guide. When you run the pipe, there's the chance that the guy just turns away and runs back up to his feet if you do it out in the open. But because you're doing it right next to the cage, the only way he'd turn is into the cage, and that's what happens with Malkoun. Guys try to jump up again, and they give up their back. Now, Malkoun sucks from the back, but a better fighter, better all-round fighter in that position would be laughing. But it was intriguing, because the first time Jonathan Pearce hit this, Onama stood back up into him with the underhook. He let him get the underhook by accident. But then later in the fight, he starts getting it and getting on the back and really dictating what's going on in the grappling by hitting this finish over and over again. And then Onama, he hit something like 4 or 5 reversals in the whole fight. He kept getting his back taken and then turning into Jonathan Pearce. As we're always talking about, the most important thing, and it's probably the most clutch situation in MMA. It's the one that changes the most fights. When you jump on someone's back and you end up on the bottom, as in you jump on someone's back and then they look up at the ceiling. So that you're both looking up at the ceiling, but you're on their back. Because now you can't strike. And they're going to hold onto your wrists and the gloves, the legal way, not inside the glove, but over the glove. And you're not going to be able to choke them. And then eventually they're going to turn back into you and they're going to be on top. And then the other one is if they go to the turtle and you try to jump on their back and they put their bum up in the air into a tripod or a quad pod and you fall over the top of them. And it happened. Those two things happen every single time there are fights on. If you consciously avoided taking people's backs unless you mounted them and they turned over and gave you their back that way, if you consciously avoided pursuing people's backs, as in getting the hooks in, you could avoid 2 of the biggest fight-changing moments in MMA altogether. And one team, aka, did for a very long time. They refused to put the hooks in. They just stayed, behind the guy in the turtle, punching them. But yeah, I get out here and talk about this every week, and then it happened 7 or 8 times between these 2 guys. But it was a great fight. Both guys were good fun. Both guys doing good technical stuff and then losing because they made little technical errors against guys who also know how to do good technical stuff. And I think Onama got the decision, but he was fined, obviously, like 20% of his purse. It's kind of like how you get a freebie eye poke or 2, or a freebie groin shot or 2. Ryan Spann kneed the groin twice and didn't get anything happen to him. He got a stern warning, a hard warning. But like you got that, over the longer scheme in MMA, you've got 1 or 2 times where you can come in massively overweight just to bully someone. Who was it? Oh, Alex Oliveira, who was the dirtiest fighter in the UFC. It's now been long enough that listeners to my there will be listeners to my show who've never heard of Alex Oliveira. He was filthy. Every single fight, he found a new way to cheat. And you were almost in admiration. I ended up quite liking him. I was like, well, fair enough. But he came in 7 pounds heavy against Will Brooks, who was very good. And Will Brooks lost that fight, and it was part of why he was cut from the UFC. And, he's got two wins over Michael Chandler, one of them being a knockout. And the UFC were like, get out. Partly because he lost to Alex Oliveira, who missed weight by like 7 pounds. If you come in 7 pounds heavy, you weren't trying. Just like, I actually bulked up for this fight. But it's 20% whether you miss by a pound or 7 pounds. So you go, okay, I'll sacrifice 20% of my purse to murk this dude and move my career along. It's like calling in sick. You get a few sickies you can use without anyone questioning it. Without needing a doctor's note or anything. Anything else on this goddamn awful card? Victor Henry versus Hanayaya played out basically how I expected. I said Hanayaya's too old, he can't strike. Victor Henry's going to hit him in the body and he's going to fold. And what happened was Victor Henry defended takedowns for the first round. And then immediately in the second round, he came out and kicked the body. And you went, oh, okay, right, it's going to start ending soon. And then he starts punching the body, going upstairs after Hanayaya's folded over, protecting his body. And then he gets the finish. Hanayaya is not only ancient, but he never added anything to his game. But the interesting thing was people were like, oh, Victor Henry beat up an old man. And I said Victor Henry was going to beat up an old man. Hanayaya is 39. Victor Henry is 36. He's just taken longer to get here. It's kind of like Machida. They used to say, like, no one was training all striking, grappling, wrestling disciplines from the time of UFC 1, except, like, Lyoto Machida. And if you go back and you look at his training history, you're like, Jesus, this dude, and then he only started fighting in his, like, late 20s. But Victor Henry's been going since 2010. It's just taken him a while to get to the UFC, or, for his career to work its way to the UFC. But like I said on the podcast, Hanayaya won silver at ADCC, the highest accolade in grappling you can get. Well, aside from gold at ADCC. But he won it when he was 19. And that was 20 years ago. And he's been fighting the nastiest bastards on earth ever since. I mean, he does need to retire. But then again, like, he knocked off 2 wins in a row a couple of years ago. There are still guys he can beat. But I think most of the time it's going to be like his fight with Enrique Barzola, which I wrote about because I enjoyed it so much. But he's got good technique on the ground. He's got decent wrestling. But even if it goes his way, if he gets into this late second round, he's like, oh my God, I'm dying of exhaustion. I tell you what, Austin Hubbard versus Michael Figlak, whatever his name is, Figlak. This was one of the better fights on the card. I watched the prelims up to this and I was like, this is dreadful. But these two were actually all right. And what you got was Michael Figlak was using really bread and butter stuff, and Austin Hubbard was trying to create openings by doing more interesting stuff, like he did a cheap punch, a shifting jab. So he jabbed as he stepped forward with his right foot into southpaw, lead right hook to the body underneath the lead arm, and left high kick and stuff like that. He was looking to land big through openings, and Figlak was just sitting back behind his jab. He'd go jab, jab, right hand, jab, body jab, right hand, and he just threw those over and over again. He had good success. Yeah, I mean, everything else on this card was dreadful. Yeah, that's about it. Luckily, next week we're doing UFC 301, which is Pantoja versus Ursig, or Ursig rather. I quite like that main event. I'm going to pop out a quick Filthy Casuals guide on something cool that Pantoja does. What else we got? Oh, Aldo's back. Oh, they've given him the co-main event. They must have been desperate. But Aldo's back against Jonathan Martinez. Oh, Joe Anderson Brito versus Jack Shaw. That'll be fun. Elvis Brenner. And that's literally it. Oh, slow week. But we'll chat all about that. And I'm sure there's other stuff going on. I'll have to check my fight schedule. I'm your boy, Jack Slack. If you want to get in on the boycast and the extra stuff I do for the boys, sign up to the Patreon. If you want to send an email to the podcast, jackslackpodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I'm writing anytime, fiveprimer.com. I'm your boy, Jack Slack. Ihor Potiera Fight Week. Bless.